Welcome to Wisco Dice. I am your host, the Cozy with the Most, and I have been joined by.
Hey guys, this is Justin, the Meeples champion.
And this is the Ghost Walker, Matt.
And I'm Suzanne.
All right, and this is episode 85 of the Wisco Dice Tabletop Gaming Podcast. Today is Sunday, October 23rd, 2021, and on today's episode, we will cover our in-depth review of Mansions of Madness. On our hobby corner, we will catch up on our miniature painting and hobby projects that we've been working on. But first, let's dive into what happened at Gen Con.
So Ben and I were able to go and experience Gen Con this year, which was different than other years with the reduced attendance and other safety precautions. So it was a unique Gen Con experience.
Besides, obviously, the whole pandemic thing, were there any big differences this year at Gen Con from previous years?
So it's hard to pull out. I've only been there one other year, so Ben may have a better idea. But there was no true dungeon there, and they had escape rooms instead. Just overall, the closing of the gaming hall, which was pandemic related, just kind of made it like everything just kind of ended at night. When you left the hall at 10 or 11, you were like, okay, I'm not missing anything because everything is done. So those are more differences I noticed that were pandemic related, but they were actually kind of nice because it forced you to stop and take a breath.
Did the pandemic restrictions, affect your enjoyment of the thing? Did it matter? Was it better, worse? What's your feeling on that stuff?
I personally like that there were less people there. It was less crowded because we were able to go up and talk to vendors and demo games we would have just walked past otherwise. We were able to just see a lot more and experience a lot more of what Gen Con has to offer because you are not stuck standing in line to get a demo of a game or standing in a line to look and see if they have a dice tower you want to purchase type of thing in the vendor hall. You're able to get pickup games in the open gaming area, which was huge. I mean, the space was huge. There were always tables and people walking around. So I think that was a lot more prevalent, was just having random people stop by and say, hey, I want to play a game, or hey, you want to play a game with me, which was really nice. It was very focused on games that way. And food trucks, you could try all the food trucks you wanted. It wasn't just which has the shortest line, because they all had the shortest line.
I honestly enjoyed this year's Gen Con, and I was just telling you the other day, as much, if not more, than any Gen Con I have previously attended to. The smaller capacity, reduced number of events, the removal of some of the huge floor space events like True Dungeon allowed, I think, for a special intimacy for everyone that was there. And people had budgets to spend, so there were people buying like crazy. I don't think there was a vendor in the exhibit hall that did poorly as far as being able to cover their costs for Gen Con, because I saw people buying like crazy. I have never experienced a year where I was able to go out on the exhibit hall and go to a vendor, walk up to a vendor, and even the ones that were super busy, like the Everdell booth, the Pandasaurus Games booth, where they had Dinosaur World and Everdell going. Yes, every one of those demo tables was packed pretty much from hall open to hall end, but you could walk up and within 20 or 30 minutes pretty easily get onto a table to play a demo of one of these games, at least get a couple of turns in and be able to try a game. And I was able to run into then, and when we played games in the open gaming, or hear people talking about how they got to demo Cora, or I got to demo some other of the games that they really wanted to check out that were at the show.
Mm-hmm.
This was definitely a small vendor Gen Con too. Many vendors that weren't there. God, I can't remember the last time I saw a vendor on the Gen Con floor. This must have had to gone back to like 2002 that actually sold like actual chainmail, like suits of chainmail. I think I even saw a vendor with chainmail bikinis. Like those have been banned. basically haven't been non-existent on the Gen Con floor since somewhere in the early 2000s. A vendor selling swords and axes and stuff like that. You had to purchase it. You did have to. As soon as you took possession of it from the booth, you had to leave the booth and take it back to your hotel.
Oh,
But
okay.
due to regulations, the way Gen Con has to do it. But
Have you seen Gen Con back in the day when it was up in Milwaukee?
yes, my first Gen Con was at Milwaukee. I will say that even though it was, you're talking about a much smaller Gen Con then, because it was so many people were packed in such a small facility, it was super crowded, where this was the full Indiana Convention Center.
Right.
So huge, double, triple the space, physical floor space of what the Milwaukee location had, with only a slightly larger crowd. I think the capacity, they never did sell out a day. And according to Gen Con, unique attendance for the weekend was pretty close to 35,000 people a day. I don't know what that means. That could be, I think probably Saturday was probably the biggest day as far as attendance, with the most events and whatnot. So that one was probably pretty close to 35,000. But, and Sunday was probably somewhere in the 20,000s is my guess.
Yeah, I was just curious how it compared with Milwaukee. I haven't gone as much as you, obviously, but I've been to the Milwaukee one, and I will say it had a much different feel than the Indianapolis one, because I've been to both, but I haven't been the last few years. So yeah, I mean, I'm actually kind of excited to hear that it was like that for you guys. So
Yeah, but you know what's going to happen next year is it's just going to be a record year, and everybody's going to go to Gen Con. Assuming pandemic things have cooled down a little bit, it'll just be the most people that have ever gone again, probably.
Maybe, but I look at the things that have grown since then. I mean, look at all the other conventions that have been growing the last few years. And I would say, at least during the pandemic, I would say they're getting more playtime than they would have without like a big thing like Origins or Gen Con or some of the other big ones having to either cancel or go much smaller. I think people are looking locally too. So the question is, will Gen Con retain its mystique? Will people go back in giant, or will they say, hey, you know what? I went to, like the local ones like Gamehole Con and things like that. Will they look at those venues and say, you know what? I had a really good time there and I didn't have to drive all the way to Milwaukee or Indianapolis.
Yeah.
I think Gen Con will do just fine. I think it'll sell out next year, and that's really the thing. Like when Gen Con 50 happened, it sold out, and that is max capacity. And I don't think that they have the capability currently to increase their daily capacity or their daily unique tickets beyond 70K or whatever it is. So
yeah.
Oh, they were at max capacity for the venue, you're saying? At Gen Con 50? Okay.
Yeah, because they completely sold out for Gen Con 50. They were completely out of tickets.
Yeah, that was I think that was the year I went, actually.
Next year also isn't I know Gen Con's not, I mean, it's a lot of focus on board games, but there's also a big role-playing component. I think it's an anniversary for D&D next year. I believe. I could be wrong.
I think it's 2024
Is it? Okay, then I'm a year off.
50th anniversary.
But if some of the logistics delays that are occurring right now, worldwide, if some of those are cleared up more, there may be releases and big releases that happen at Gen Con, which is one thing that did not occur this year in any significant form, is, so thing that kept some people away, or it made it easier for them to be away. But if you are, hey, this new game's coming out and this is the place I can get my hands on it first, unless I want to wait months for it to get shipped to me, that may drive some people coming and, skipping their local cons, but coming there and just focusing on shopping. It'll be interesting to see.
So what would you guys say are the highlights for you of the show?
So we did a couple new to both of us activities that I kind of signed Ben up for and said, you're doing this.
And she does now every year that we go.
Yes. But they were very good to experience. We were able to get tickets and participate in AEG's Big Game Night. which was a big kind of social event, and you walk away with a bag of games they're getting rid of, and some new titles in there. So it was fun to just kind of talk with other people that we would not have normally sat for a few hours and talked to, and play these games, and just this kind of party atmosphere. And the thing I really enjoyed and plan to do at the next Gen Con, with or without Ben, is playtesting. So Gen Con has a first exposure playtesting hall where designers can come and their games can be in any state of development. And they run it through and get your feedback on it. So we played a game called Mischief at the Museum that both of us played, and it's pretty close to going to Kickstarter. Then I played another one focused on rock and roll or DJing that the gentleman has been working on for several years and is getting closer and refining it. So for me, those are really interesting. Those would be the play testing, especially, was a big highlight for me.
It was the developer of the games that you were playing the game with, and they taught it to you? Is that kind of how those work?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yep. So both the games we played, the developer did teach us the game. Other games I saw there, the developers were focusing on, hey, are my instructions clear enough? So they were having the people sign up for the game read through the instructions and set it up, and everything going through that way too.
Sure. How far along were the games you played in terms of production?
Both of them had prototypes printed up. The one both Ben and I played, the museum-focused game, I think he is very much has a schedule and is on track to launch a Kickstarter the next several months. The other one is he's also been trying to launch his Kickstarter for a couple years. You know, they both had pretty decent prototypes mocked up.
I'd say when I generally walked around that room, the games that I saw were from a prototype. They were farther along than, like, hey, somebody scribbled on some index cards and that's what you're playing with, or printed off on a standard paper printer and here's my game. It was all prototype. It was, for the most part, all prototype level components, prototype level quality games, which for me, who hates print and play prototypes, I cannot. Suzanne loves it. She doesn't care. For me, not having that's tangible, pretty close to reality components is a big, like, I just check out. Having games that were farther along in that production cycle, where they had, you know, some real components, and maybe the components change a little bit when they go to mass production, was much better. So I actually really enjoyed Mischief at the Museum. It'll be one that we'll probably cover on Kickstarter Monday when it comes out, because I thought it was a pretty good game.
Cool. That sounds fun. That kind of thing interests me. That's neat.
So I think for me, the biggest highlights for the show were really, we sat down, I think we knew we had this gap in our Saturday evening where we had nothing scheduled. We'd run out of, you know, all of the events that we were able to sign up for. Suzanne was basically able to sign up for. We were finished up Saturday afternoon. We knew we had all our shopping done. You know, the exhibit hall closes Saturday, and we were like, we weren't really sure. We were thinking we were going to go out to dinner, or we were just going to relax, maybe chill in the hotel and play some of the games we had. And then we decided, we went back to the hotel Saturday afternoon, caught a quick nap, and decided, you know, we had decided earlier that day that evening we were going to turn into Wisco Dice open game night with all of the purchases that we had acquired at the show. We were just going to go snag a table, and we were going to give out promo, you know, stickers and teach people games. And if it was just Suzanne and I playing games at a table in Hall A open gaming, so be it. But it turned out to be a crazy success. We had 4 dozen people come through over the course of the evening and get stickers and play games, and we taught Dice Miner and I think the two hot ones we have were Dice Miner and the Night Cage. Like those were games people wanted to try, they wanted to play. We had picked them up over the course of the show. They were easier games to teach too, so it was really fast for us to teach. Like I kept tearing down, as an example, I kept tearing down the Night Cage because I'm like, okay, I'm sick of playing this game at this point. I've played it like 4 or 5 times now. I want to play something different. And the next, somebody else will be like, okay, well, we have this stack of games. Oh, well, I really wanted to play Night Cage. I'm like, okay, well, let me get it back out again. So it was kind of that kind of thing that was going on for the evening. So that was a big highlight. And then Board Game Brunch on Sunday, that was another big, being able to do that thing, that regular weekly show that we do, that weekly blog thing that we do at Gen Con was special. Like that, just being able to do it there. And then we actually played it twice, and we had people that we played games with the night before come to, because we were telling them about what we do for Board Game Brunch, giving them the spiel of what Wisco Dice is and some of our regular content. And they actually came and participated in Board Game Brunch and played Truck Off, Food Truck Frenzy from Adam's Apple Games with us, which was awesome. And you can see about that as well as more about all of our show highlights on WiscoDice.com.
So, important question. You did mention Dice Miner and Night Cage, but what other games did you get at Gen Con this year? Tell us about your haul.
We had a stupid, crazy haul that we spent way too much money on. Let's just say that.
All right, highlights then.
That's the danger of being able to walk up and also having game designers grab you as you're walking down because they want to show you their game because they have a few minutes. So
yeah, that's how we acquired Anomia, right?
Yep.
He literally was just standing there, just grabbing people and like, hey, please let me talk to you about my game. And he would, he was rotating through 2 or 3 or 4 different titles, but he showed us Anomia, and I'm like, that sounds like a great fun party game. So we went and bought it, and then it wasn't expensive, and then he signed it for us, which was awesome. Like, so we have a signed copy of that game.
Yeah. Dice
Miner, which they did not have very many copies of due to issues with getting in. So, but that was another one where this game was not on my radar. I'd never heard of it before. I think Suzanne, you had.
I may have passed. It wasn't on my top 22 list of games to check out though.
Yep.
So
we were able to, but it was another one where the lady, we walking by and we were like, hey, there's a bunch of dice, and whenever we're kind of walking slowly because there's nobody there. There was, when I say nobody, there was the exhibit hall. This is I think Thursday, so the exhibit hall was pretty busy. But there was still it was plenty of space for you to walk around. You weren't getting bumped by 18 backpacks because people were packed in there like super tight or anything like that. You had plenty of space to comfortably walk around and just slowly check things out that looked interesting. And so the demoer was just getting ready to start teaching another demo, and she's like, "Come over here, if you're interested, why don't you try a demo too?" And we tried a demo and then immediately bought it. Super super cool dice drafting game. Dinosaur World, which I don't know if I regretted not backing the Kickstarter for, but we got to actually finally play it just this last week. It's from Panasaurus Games. It's very different than Dinosaur Island, but
really
same kind of idea that you're managing a dinosaur theme park, but mechanically it's a much different game, and it's much different than Dinogenics, which I really like. So now I have these 3 dinosaur theme park games that are all very different games. And then of course the Night Cage from Smirk and Dagger, which is a little bit of a different kind of game for Smirk and Dagger. You don't think of them being a serious kind of dark, almost horror aspect kind of themed game, but the Night Cage is a tile laying game. The tiles fall off the map if they do not stay lit up by the players. And the whole time it's a cooperative experience where you're trying to get these keys. Each player needs to acquire a key, and then you all have to get to a gate before your candle burns out, which is basically this big giant holder that has all of the tiles that you draw off of as you're exploring this thing. So very interesting game, a lot of fun. We only played it with like the base monster and set up the basic setup. We didn't go into any of the advanced setup for any of our plays, but I'm looking forward to getting that back to the table and throwing in some of those advanced components into it and seeing what it's like.
So the question is, how many copies of that do you think you sold on Saturday night?
Who knows? Like I will say, Smirkadagger brought plenty of them to the convention, so I'm sure. And they were selling like hotcakes. Like we would go in the exhibit hall in the morning, and there'd be this stack that's 5 foot tall, and by the evening, the stack would be about,
2 games.
A
A few
foot or
more,
two tall
yeah.
by the time close to the vendor hall. So they were selling them like hotcakes. So who knows? I would suspect that there's potential that a couple of copies were sold because of what we were doing. Yeah, so there were a lot of other games I think we picked up too. I will make mention to Gooey Cube. I played my very first Dungeons and Dragons game at Gen Con, which was within the Gooey Cube, which is a company that creates 5e compatible adventures and has their own campaign setting or their own world and setting. They ran their I played in that D&D game and picked up chapter 1 of the Red Star Rising campaign, which they just finished the 4th chapter. And each chapter takes you through 1 to 2 character levels. The really cool thing with Gooey Cube's product is that it comes with a ton of graphical players' handouts, pictures of the NPCs with on one side with just general text about how the background of the character or motivations of the character on the backside. So literally, you as the DM, as you hold out the hand up to your players to look at from your side of the screen, you can be reading the backside of it to be like, oh, okay, this guy's supposed to behave this way. And then handouts of various scenes, like say some of the dungeon rooms. And when I was playing in the game, like that was so helpful. Like I sometimes struggle in the player's side of things to be able to visualize everything the DM is telling me, which makes it then I kind of shut down a little bit as a player from an interactions perspective. Like it made it so easy for me to visualize what the DM was getting across by being able to see, like, just as an example, we found this like creepy half dead tree, and in the tree were like 2 tree houses, and as you climbed up to the lower tree house, there was a door, and the door had some creepy words inscribed on it. But the creepy thing that I got out of it was like there was this stuffed teddy bear laying there, and I was like, don't touch the teddy bear, it'll probably eat your hand or something, right? So it was so easy to kind of get into that and see that and visualize that and be able to then put it all together. And it was really well put together. It was a great experience. So I had to go pick up a product from them. So I picked up like I said, I bought that first chapter of the Red Star Rising campaign, The Darkest Dream. And I look forward to at some point when we get past running Icewind Dale, Realm of the Frost Maiden, maybe that's the next campaign we run is that one. But we'll see. I could do other things.
Well, did you skip over my favorite game that we purchased, Cora?
I did skip it.
Yellow Games. That was one of the few on my list that I had going in there that we did purchase. And in the game, it's this rise of this empire, and you play different cities, and there is combat in it in a way, and not too much player interaction, but you're building up your city and trying to be the best. And it's like medium crunchy level. It's not difficult to explain how the game goes, but you do get to think in it, and that one I've just really been enjoying a lot. I was disappointed there were some games on my list that for whatever reason the publishers didn't have booths there, ended up not having a booth there. So I didn't get to check them out. And a few games that I was super excited about, like Cosmic Frog, that I got there and was like, oh, this is not the game for me. But, it was really good. We got it, like Ben mentioned, we did check out a whole bunch of games and made lots of purchases. So, a couple of them we checked out just on recommendations of people we saw near the food trucks. And we now have a game, Tinder-esque game for dating dragons and everything. So, got a wide range of games there.
Yeah, I will say I was a little like Cosmic Frog looked really cool, but it also looked super fiddly, and I was a little disappointed with that. With all these like stacks of tiles would have to set up the board. They would take you longer, I think, to set that game up than it's going to take you to play it. So and the art on the cards was really super noisy. Like it's a very specific art style, and some people really love it, but I found it very super noisy. So yeah, as much as I kind of wanted to come home with that one, just because it sounded silly, fun, and kind of crazy being giant space frogs, I just didn't make the cut. But yeah, I was really annoyed that like the biggest game I was looking for was it Origins First Builders or something like that from Board and Dice. Wasn't at the show.
That's too bad. That one looks cool. Yeah, I may have backed that one. I have to go check my Kickstarter stuff.
Yeah, it's pre-order right now from Board and Dice. I don't think Board and Dice did a Kickstarter for it. I think it's literally pre-order right now.
It recently, then yeah.
Yeah, they was up for pre-order during Gen Con, so you could have pre-ordered it with they had a special thing, but yeah, you couldn't get a copy of it at the show, or you couldn't even play or demo or see a copy of it at the show. So
that's too bad.
Yeah, there were a couple of others that we were like, yeah, the vendor here for this one isn't here. The game is pre-releasing at Gen Con, or it's available on their website at Gen Con, and they released it with Gen Con, but it was not at the show itself. And that was probably my one thing I will take from this year's Gen Con that was disappointing, was that normally you go to Board Game Geek and you see the list of games that are coming out of Gen Con, and you can go to see any of them at the show. And this year, that wasn't the case. And I actually commented, I think, on Facebook on Board and Dice when they were promoting Origins during the show, and that you could pre-order it. I was like, it would have been really nice if you could actually see the components and try it at Gen Con. They didn't have to bring it. They could have literally shipped a copy or two and had somebody just have it set up in their booth, and then just tell people that were at the show, go look at it at that. Because that was actually something I think like there was a vendor that had a bunch of like FFG Fantasy Flight Games titles, including some stuff that was I don't know that they had anything that was that was just hey, check this out, but they had some stuff that was like relatively very recent or releasing very close to Gen Con, and it was straight that they had, and there were some other vendors that had some stuff that was exclusive, like bigger game stores that were on the show floor that had some exclusive titles from various game manufacturers that weren't at Gen Con but wanted to make sure that they had a presence there, so they shipped it with these larger local game stores that had a presence at Gen Con. So that was unfortunate for Origins, and I'm still super excited for that game.
One thing I just realized, and obviously way too late, that I don't know what Gen Con Online had, that maybe you could have watched and joined online for Gen Con to see some of these releases that were releasing at Gen Con but weren't physically at the show.
I guess I could have spent all night from midnight to like 6 a.m. instead of sleeping watching Gen Con Online content.
Yeah, why didn't you do that?
I know, why didn't you, Ben?
Yeah. No, we had a super full Gen Con.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, and it was good. Not being able to see as many games as we were able to, and go, you know what? I can see this gameplay, and this is not the game for me. Probably helped our pocketbook, because if the lines were long, most likely I would have been like, oh, I really want this game. It looks cool from what I've read. Who cares about the demo? I don't have time to sit here for 2 hours to get a demo time. I'll just buy it. Maybe that was just me. I spent less that way.
I don't think we spent less.
I
saying.
spent less. You may not have.
Oh, that's how. You didn't spend anything in 2019 either. You just made me spend it all. So whatever. Yeah, I think you spent more this year. Anyways, you can see more about what Conesy and Suzanne did at Gen Con on our blog at WiscoDice.com. If you want to play games with the Wisco Dice team or meet us, we will be at GameholeCon in Madison, Wisconsin next. GameholeCon is October 21st through 24th. We will have plenty of swag, including stickers available for anyone who walks up and mentions they're a fan of the show to us, or plays in any of our games, or just happens to be walking by and we decide to give you a sticker for whatever reason. We'll probably have some other stuff, and we'll be showcasing our new awesome t-shirts that unfortunately are only available for us hosts. But hey, if you're really interested, maybe we can get a t-shirt run going in the future. But for now, let's dive into our Hobby Corner. Hobby Corner is where we talk about what miniature hobby projects we have been working on. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here with my project, which has been basically doing a lot more 3D printing. Some of that I can't talk about because my players in our D&D campaign have not experienced it yet. Hint, hint to you guys that are playing in an exciting Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden campaign. Expect more cool stuff to hit our table for visuals here in the near future. But I also printed this really cool, it's a small, old, kind of worn cottage, which is the largest 3D printing project I have ever done as far as size of a single print. Like, I think the base and the roof of this thing, each one of those that's two separate pieces, and each one of those took something like 4 to 5 days to print at the print settings that I used. So just amount of plastic in a single piece, amount of print time. It actually started making me nervous and thinking, man, I don't have my printer on a UPS. If I lost power anytime during this 5-day print, I would be so upset. So, sometime in the future, I think I'm going to get a UPS so I can, for my printer, so I don't have to worry so much about those longer print runs, because I can see the quality of this building. I mean, there are things that I need to do to improve my skills and my settings that are on my printer, but the quality of this print and the way it looks visually, I don't have the skills to be able to build this on my own in a reasonable amount of time, in the same amount of time, with foam core and traditional terrain building techniques. Like, this thing's actually really pretty cool. And I think I could make this building in foam core. It's just the time is foam core and some balsa wood or whatnot. I could probably build this building myself, and with those materials. But yeah, I'm super ecstatic about that, and that's making me very happy. And I'm so glad I bought the Creality Ender 3 when I did, because it's turned into a big asset. And next up, I've got some things, I think Suzanne, you pointed out, for Everdell to print that I'm going to print, and then I've got some other board game components stuff that I'm going to print, and then I'm going to start working on probably another building or two, so I can start fleshing out this fantasy 3D printed town that I'm starting to work on, because I wanted some more buildings. Ultimately, I wanted more buildings that were a little more Icewind Dale feel and that fit the campaign, because there will probably be some more encounters inside the various 10 towns, and being able to have a few more buildings that are appropriate and just look a little cooler, potentially even with the ability to pop a roof off and then have decor and stuff printed and put inside for the players to interact with as they're maybe going through an encounter. Just, I think, ups the level of the game experience for everyone at the table. So that's my hobby project.
Yes. So Anna and I, my wife Anna, and I have been playing some Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. I'm starting to work on painting some of the excellent minis that come with that game. So I am taking my first crack at a larger model. So the hunting horrors in Mansion of Madness are kind of a winged worm, and I wanted to attempt painting a larger model than sort of a standard mini size with some unique features like these big wings, and also experiment with some new colors that I haven't really messed with before. So I'm looking at doing some kind of otherworldly, bizarre colors for these things, like some bright pinks or purples maybe, and trying to find some interesting blends to give them an otherworldly feel to them, and potentially some kind of horror feel, make them a little creepy or just strange looking. So I'm getting that project going, and we'll throw up some images on the blog as soon as I have something cool to show.
All right, and I think that gets us through our hobby corner for this episode. The rest of us just haven't been getting to the hobby table as much. It's the fall, and that's a very difficult time for hobby, but we will definitely try to get our hobby mojo going a little bit more and do some more projects as we get into the later fall and the winter months. I'm very excited to see what all of you guys put together and work on. So with that, let's talk a little bit about Extra Life. Wisco Dice will once again be participating in Extra Life. It's been several years and quite a few host changes since last time we participated in Extra Life. For those of you who aren't familiar with Extra Life, it is a charity fundraising event for various children's hospitals across the country where gamers get together, streamers, video game players, tabletop gamers, all of us get together and play games for a 24-hour period every year on a date that is set up by Extra Life. So this year is no exception, and we're going to return to form. But this year, we will be running various events online using tools like our Discord server, Board Game Arena, and others to play games. Beauty about playing online is that it gives you, our listeners, an opportunity to play in the game with us. In order to play, you just have to let us know which events you want to play on and be on our Discord at the start times. Wonder where you can find those start times? Well, we'll have a blog post out here very soon and to let you know what events, what the start times are, and when you can get signed on to play. There's no obligation, no requirements, just choose an event, be on the Discord at the start time, and as long as there's capacity, you can play in the game. That said, if you do want to ensure that you get to play in a session, then donate to the Wisco Dice team on Extra Life. Proof of donation to our Extra Life campaign will give you preferred access to our events. Effectively, if you show up on time and an event is full and you donated and someone else didn't, you get a seat. Of course, always subject to the person who is running the games, if there does have to be somebody kicked from a game, of course. Any donation size, though, is acceptable for this. We'll have a link to our Extra Life campaign. If you just feel like donating, please do. It really does mean a lot to us. Game day will be November 6th, 2021, so make sure that you get those donations in to help us help Wisco Dice support the Children's Wisconsin Hospital and play a few games along with us if you have the opportunity. And for now, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll dive into our review of Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. Woot woot! Hey folks, this is the Conesy with the Most. I just wanted to take a moment to tell you about Misty Mountain Games here in Madison, Wisconsin, where you can find CCGs, RPGs, board games, minis, paint and hobby supplies for all of your tabletop gaming experience and needs. If you can't find it online, give them a phone call or swing on by their brick and mortar store here on the east side of Madison. Don't worry, that is MistyMountainGames.com. Check them out today.
All right, folks, welcome back from break. Today we're going to talk about Mansions of Madness, the second edition. So, Mansions of Madness was published by Fantasy Flight Games, and the playtime can vary dramatically depending on what scenario you're playing. It can go anywhere from as short as 90 minutes to several hours, and it will support 1 to 5 players. Now, I've had the opportunity to play the first edition and the second edition of this game, and I will tell you, it is quite a bit improved going from first edition to the second edition. So, going into the game components, Conzi, you want to talk a little bit about the miniatures in this game?
Yeah, so this game is very dependent on a boatload of miniatures, which are all very nicely sculpted, very unique, represent both the investigators that represent you as the player, and all of the various mythos gribblies that you're going to encounter in the gameplay. Mansions of Madness is a game about exploring the mythos, the Cthulhu, the H.P. Lovecraft type narrative things. So when you go into these miniatures, you have things like Starspawn and cultists, and then of course the like 1920s-ish investigators, and they're all very tropey as far as and cliche a lot of these things. But that's part of what makes this game great. And then the miniatures are all of relatively decent quality. They're board game miniatures, so they're a little bendy. The plastic's a little whatever. The big thing that that annoys me about the miniatures in this game is the basis for the monsters, and I think this is a holdover from first edition Mansions of Madness, because you were able to port all of those monster and miniature components over from first to second that you already had in your collection. The miniature bases are designed to be able to slide a cardboard tile into that gives you some details about the monster on it. But then the monsters they like have peg holes where you're supposed to be able to push the monsters into those peg holes. And I would say 50% of the time you can actually get the monster in the peg hole, which is frustrating. So then the monsters while you're playing the game are falling off the bases, or you have to pick the things up to look at stats that are on the bottom side of the base. And so there's some clunkiness from the miniature perspective that way. I'm actually, for my copy of the game, I want to rebase all of the monsters and then simplify the monsters with a monster reference sheet rather than deal with the lousy bases for those miniatures that come in the box. But the game itself well makes up for that, as we're about to see. Suzanne, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the game board and tiles?
So one aspect I really enjoy about this game is that the game board you build throughout the game. So as you go on your journey and discover different rooms or different areas, you pull out new tiles, and the app will tell you which tile to find and how to lay it out to make this map. So you may start in the lobby of a hotel and decide that you're going to explore a certain doorway that you see. Well, you have no clue what's behind it. So these double-sided tiles are very detailed, looking like it's like you're looking down into the room, and to me, they really add a lot to the game, and it's amazing how you can use the same tiles in so many different scenarios, and they just add to the theme of each of these scenarios. To move around, you do have characters. Justin, do you want to kind of tell us about these characters a little bit?
Yeah, so each of the characters that you can play, one of these investigators, has a set of abilities like strength or agility or willpower, and they have some abilities that they're good at and some abilities that they're less good at. For instance, one of the characters, Rita Young, is kind of an athlete, so she has a very high strength, but her influence is very low, so she's not going to be able to sweet talk anybody. You choose an investigator as a player at the start of the scenario, and then also each investigator gets a special ability. For instance, the Rita Young I mentioned is athletics, so she gets to move a little further every time she takes a move action. Other characters might let you re-roll dice when you perform tests, which is really helpful. And some of them might gain clue tokens for certain conditions like passing a horror check or defeating a monster. So you can, as a group, this is a cooperative game. So as a group, you can choose your investigators wisely to get a useful combination of abilities and special abilities to work together, picking characters who all have really low health. Probably a bad choice. You might want to make sure there's some stronger folk in there in combination with people who might have lower health but are really good at passing like lore checks when those come up. So beyond that, once you pick your characters, the app will give you a selection of starting items, and there are a huge deck of items in this game. There's standard items with things like crowbars and lead pipes as weapons, bandages for healing, holy water, candles, basic stuff. And then there's special items, which might be a magical amulet that could protect you from spells or from going insane potentially. Beyond that, there are actually spell cards as well that characters can use to attack monsters or potentially heal or things like that as well. So there's a lot of variability each time you play. When you start a scenario, you could get a wholly new set of items that could completely change how that scenario plays out based on what it assigns you. And then there are also decks of cards for the terrible things that can happen to you, like getting injuries and wounds, which might be things like a broken arm or a broken leg, which changes what you're able to do on your turn. Horror cards, which give your character negative conditions and eventually drive you insane, which can completely change the way you play the game, as well as just bad condition cards like being stunned or dazed, which prevent you from taking actions or gaining the benefits of like rolling for clue icons when you roll for tests and things like that. All those cards as well potentially have alternate effects on the backside that can add some more variability when you play too.
This game leverages custom dice, which is very typical from a Fantasy Flight game. Those dice have clue symbols on them and whatnot. But it leverages the dice in a very unique way. So when you're resolving actions, as Justin alluded to on say your character card, and you have an ability like say strength, it is represented with a number of say 4. That means you roll 4 dice and then input typically like a strength check, you'll need X number of successes, or you might not even know how many successes you need, so you're just gonna roll a strength check and tell the app how many successes you had, and then based on that it will tell you what happened. So it's a very simple but yet elegant system of leveraging these dice to be able to roll things, to roll these various checks, and you just look very quickly. Hey, I have this many dice, and I roll them, and then I can use clues to convert clue symbols on my dice rolls to successes, and if I have enough successes, good things happen. Yay, successes! All of that is really dependent on the app, and without the app, Mansions of Madness Second Edition wouldn't be what it is. First edition leveraged an Overlord player to take the role of the app, where they would have to set up the map, and you had the map completely set up at the beginning of the game with these stacks of tiles, and they all had to be very set up very precisely. And if you made one error in setup, it could dramatically impact the investigator player's ability to be successful and be able to solve things, because the stacks would have maybe you might get to a point where there's a story element that the Overlord would have to then explain to the players, and that would tell them, oh, hey, I need to go over to the kitchen and find the kitchen to do this thing. But if the stack was messed up, sorry, you've been playing for 2 hours with a 45-minute or an hour setup, and sorry, you couldn't, you messed up and the whole thing was for naught. Where Second Edition puts that all in the course of the app, which makes the app very exciting, because it also sets up that element, as Suzanne mentioned, when you explore a new tile, the app tells you what you explore. You don't know what's on the other side of doors or certain areas. You have to actually explore it, which makes exploring much more interactive and interesting, and gets you a bit creeped out, like, oh my goodness, what's going to be behind this door? The music that the app uses really helps set the ambience and the mood. The art that also is included with the app also includes, that gives you that you feel like you're looking at 1920s kind of creepy art that goes with it too. The app does a couple of other things. It really does balance the game automatically with the player count and accessories, the various items that are given to players, so that if you're playing a game with only 2 investigators, as a 2-player game, you tell the app the 2 players that you've picked and the 2 characters you've picked, and it auto balances the game for you. You don't have to do that balance. So it's very flexible that way. Really, in my opinion, make this game from a game that was really kind of hard to play and you had to be super precise to a game that's very playable and now approachable and simplifies a huge amount of the mechanics of the game so that you can just focus on having fun as the player. What are your feelings about the app? Does it help your gameplay? Do you not like it because it's introducing this piece of electronics into the gameplay? What do you guys think?
I personally feel like, and I've played several games that have an app that comes with it. I really, really love it. And I feel like the nice thing about the app is before you had somebody who had to play the Overlord, which is basically the person that's playing against you. So you're not really participating in the game. You're controlling the narrative. And with the app, it keeps those elements so that everybody else at the table can participate and they're part of the story. It's just the storyteller for me. So I really, really like it. And the fact that, and I believe, Ben, when you did it, we did something similar. The last time I played this game, my wife has a Bluetooth speaker that we connected to her tablet to do this. And the ambiance and the music playing through a Bluetooth speaker just, I feel like, adds something to the game. So I don't know. For me, it's a really big addition. I think it's a great transformation of the board game genre to include multiple mediums. So, it's not just online, it's not just on the table. You can combine that sort of online randomness with the, and a tablet combined with the game.
I have to 100% agree with Matt on the impact it has on immersion. It cannot be overstated how good a job the app does of creating a sense of being in this world and thematically driving the game. It really makes it great. I think there are some downsides in the way that the app works sometimes. And one scenario that came up when Anna and I were playing recently is Anna's character had the option to, there was someone listening at the other side of a door trying to break into the room our investigators were in. And she had the option to break down the door. She was playing a strong character. She said, okay, I'm going to break down the door. And she rolled 3 successes on her roll. Really good. We were very excited. When she went in to put her successes into the app, she accidentally clicked the confirm button when it was at 0. And there is no way in the app to go back and change that result to what it should have been. Looked for an undo button or anything like that. Couldn't find it. Luckily, this happened at the start of a scenario, so I ended up resetting the whole scenario and starting it up again, which didn't impact us too much. We had to get a whole new set of items instead of the ones we started with. So that kind of just, the slip of a finger could potentially totally change the outcome is a little frustrating. So that's maybe the one downside I see is, depending on the device you're playing with, a smaller tablet. We're using a smaller tablet to do this. There's no way to undo what you did. So that's a little bit of a downside. Ultimately, it's, I think, entirely a benefit to the game. It's really smooth and it makes it possible to just play with 2 players and not worry about managing all the rules in the background.
Yeah, that's very similar to what I was thinking there, Justin, is that it helps with the immersion. It helps with the game flow, too. It does. Every time we play it again, I have to remind myself which buttons on the tablet which icons I tap for what. And I don't think I've made a mistake we haven't been able to undo or has been costly for us. But that would be my biggest complaint, I guess, with the app, is just remembering what, icons you tap for what. But it does really help with the flow.
Yeah,
and
I think
immersion.
there's one thing I wish the app, besides having a quick back button or a option for a "Are you sure?" or something on a couple of those checks where it's very critical to the game, like the breaking down the door example you just had. It would be that it starts each scenario with this amazing voice actor narration of setting up the story and the story elements, and it's really cool and typically very kind of a creepy telling of what's happening. But then when you hit all of the future story elements throughout the rest of the game, or start interacting with various, maybe there are people that are at a party that you're going to and you're talking to these party, it's just text. You have the creepy music in the background, so it clearly, from an application perspective, it has access to do the speech, but they did, they decided, for whatever reason, I'm sure cost and whatever, but I would really have loved it if they would have had voice actors for those extra interactions to help just add that immersion and ambiance to it, instead of just reading the text. That would have been really cool. That was my one observation. It's not terrible. It certainly doesn't impact the game, and I'm sure there's people out there that are super glad that it doesn't have voice actors and just has text. So
Why don't we talk a little bit about just the gameplay and our experience with that? Banshees of Madness Second Edition is a fully cooperative horror mystery dungeon crawl, I would say. Some scenarios are more combat oriented, and you're going to be fighting the cultists and the horrors and the other monsters that show up in Lovecraft mythos. And some are more puzzle oriented. You're solving a mystery and you need to explore this mansion and search out all the clues and evidence that you need to figure out what's going on in the scenario. And there are puzzles actually in the app that you can solve too. Tile sliding puzzles, combination puzzles. So for people that are more interested in the mystery and the puzzle solving, there's definitely that in there too. One minor complaint I do have about the way this game plays is, as Ben kind of mentioned, there is a lot of text to read. Thematically, it's really well done and well written, but I think that it could be a turnoff for some players. For example, every time you attack a monster and a monster attacks you, there's a small paragraph to read that describes in cool, gory detail what's happening. It might be that the horrible deep one spits up a nasty glob of goo at you, and you need to roll an agility check to dodge that and avoid damage. With a lot of monsters in play or over the course of time, I think it can get maybe a little tedious to read those paragraphs every time. But for some people, I think that's just going to thematically boost the game even further. It definitely is fun those first couple times to read in detail the combat details. They always change. They're different, and thematically it's great. But there's a lot of text to read. Gameplay is fairly open-ended. There's a lot of choices for what you can do as actions on your turn. Basic stuff would be moving around the map and exploring things, obviously, attacking monsters that are there. But you can do some surprising things too sometimes, like stealing items from other players. That's just an action you can take. You can also notably set fire, as long as you have the ability to do so, essentially at any time, which is a unique thing I've never really experienced playing this game, but it's like a standard option that you could just set fire to a room. I don't know if you guys have ever played a scenario where that was like a good option for you to do, but I thought that was just interesting that it's an open-ended thing. You could just start a fire somewhere and it'll spread and hurt people and hurt monsters too. Being open-ended, the game allows you to make mistakes in that way too. And if you spend too much time exploring around and checking every corner, you may be in trouble by the end of the scenario. The game doesn't hold your hand. You can definitely make mistakes and waste time and get the investigators killed. Any other kind of gameplay highlights for you guys that might set this apart from other games?
Yeah, I mean, I think the time crunch pressure, and you don't really pick up on it, but the game does escalate if you take too many rounds to complete the game. And there's no actual round tracker. You don't, unless you're tracking it manually, you don't know how many rounds you've been doing things, or where it starts to escalate the game into more and more challenging things or difficult monsters, or how much harder it is going to be to overcome the ritual at the end, or whatever it might be. That's ramping up the escalation. It builds up that tenseness and builds up that anticipation that, like, oh my god, I need to move, but I really want to investigate all this. I want to explore everything. I want to unlock. I want to know everything that there is to know here. So it's really interesting balance of trying to discover and explore versus I need to hurry up and get on with it before it really gets bad. So you really have to do some analysis with all of the text it's giving you to try to put together what are the best decision points for you to do, what are the best actions that you can do as a group, where the things that you want to go investigate, versus, man, I really want to look at that picture that's on the wall, but is a picture of some relative's face really relevant to where this is going, like, or what I need to do. You're weighing those decisions at every opportunity when you're interacting with the app, and that really, for me, really drives up that immersive narrative and makes you feel that, like, tension and tenseness as you progress through the game, because you're like, oh, hey, I reference like you're at a party and you're talking to the guests, and I remember that mission pretty. I think I've done it a couple times, but you're never quite sure. You're like trying to figure out which one of these guests might be a murderer, and you're running around talking to these people, and you're talking with your other players, like, do you think it's this person or that person, or do we have enough? Who should we go talk to? Because you're trying to optimize that for the amount those actions for the amount of time before everything hits the fan and you're in deep trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it, favors storytelling over the perfect game balance, though. I mean, the storytelling is amazing, but there is a fair amount of randomness to the game, because, I mean, I've had times where everybody's had really awesome dice rolls and it feels like we're just rolling through the game. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, nobody can hit the monster, or we need to get this one lore check done and nobody seems to be able to do it, or we just need that one item. And then you just you watch everything cascade into this pit of hell very quickly. But I mean, but the storytelling, I think, works really, really well in this
you need that character
game
with lore and they're on the other side of the map. And it's like, it's going to be 2 or 3 rounds for them to
that'll only take
move all the way over there.
Get to where you need them. Yeah.
I was just gonna go off of a little bit what Ben Conzi was saying, with you need to balance out your investigation and moving through, with also you need to balance out your characters that you're selecting, which is how you are moving through there, so that if you get into a situation where you need someone stronger with lore, that they are focusing on those type of checks and are able to run over there. So I like to play fighty characters. So I need to make sure that I don't get bogged down if I pick a fighty character on examining every little detail in the rooms, but make sure whoever else I'm playing with does have someone who can explore and do that. So I think that's really important with the gameplay, is just to make sure you have a balance, not only with what you were doing and spending time on, but a balance on who your characters are.
There's so much exploration to this game that it benefits you to spread out as a tactic, but then all of a sudden, like you said, you like to play the fighty characters. Well, I'm kind of the counterpoint. I like to play the more mystical, explore, lore characters. What'll almost inevitably happen is that we will split up because it's more efficient to explore, and then you're on like one side of the map, I'm on the other side of the map, and I'm the one that triggers the monsters. So now you're having to dash all the way back so you can get in. You can do what your character's good at, while my character is going, oh crud, how do I evade and get away from this thing because I can't do anything to it.
Yeah, you can definitely benefit from being together and being able to be cooperative and passing items around and things like that, but it does seem smart to spread out as well and really just get all the map opened up to figure things out. One aspect we haven't mentioned yet is as the game progresses and your character experiences these horrible otherworldly things happening, you take on these horror cards, which if you get too many of them can eventually drive you insane. And when that happens, you take an insane card, which has some special secret condition on the back of it, which can affect how you play the game or how you win the game, and could impact how cooperative your character might be in the game as well. Maybe not quite a hidden traitor mechanic, but can almost get to that point of now I have a little bit different goals than the rest of the players.
Oh, surely nothing bad could ever happen there, Justin.
But just another aspect of gameplay that adds some fun thematic twists and a little randomness at the same time.
All right. So let's do this. Let's talk about where we would rate the game. So here at Wisco Dice, we rate our games on the same scale as the Board Game Geeks, 1 to 10, where 1 is absolutely garbage and you should totally pass, to 10 that is an absolute must buy and play. So me personally, I'm a little in between 8 and 7. I do think the app is amazing. I understand there's some quirks, but nothing's perfect. I just feel like this game went from where in the previous edition it was very, unapproachable and became a really long game, to one that you could actually throw on the table in a reasonable amount of time, depending on the scenario, and has enough immersion and depth that it's just fun to play, even if there's some fiddly bits with it. So, Justin, what do you think?
This game is a 7 for me. Narratively and thematically, it is just a great experience, very fun. It's a perfect October, Halloween, spooky time game, but it can sometimes be a long game to play. Obviously, depending on the scenario, that can change, but it can go long, and that is maybe a little bit of a downside. I think also it can be disappointing if you aren't expecting this to be a game where there's a fair chance you're going to lose the scenario. It's a Lovecraft world mythos type game, and bad things will happen and do happen. So you should go into the game expecting that, not expecting to win every time. So 7 for me.
So I really do enjoy this game. I don't know that I've ever straight up said, no, I don't want to play it. I rated it as a 6 though, and mainly for the components and the time it takes during gameplay, where you have to stop and sort through the stacks to figure out which is the right component that you need, whether it's a monster, an NPC, or it's one of the tiles. So I think for me to rate it a little higher, I need to figure out some better organization for our copy to make that go a little bit quicker. And otherwise it's a nice game. It's a good game to play with other people. I mean, obviously it's a cooperative game, so you need to want to play with other people, but it is a fun game to talk and play.
Yep, so this game, I'm going to rate pretty much where everyone else on this game rated it, at a 7. It's a game I'm almost always up to play, but between the monster bases being a bit flaky, and Suzanne, you did have a great point that I didn't even think about. We do have quite a bit of content for this game with expansions and whatnot. There are a lot of expansions for it. I think we are pretty close to having all of the expansions in our copy of it. And because of that, the app, you don't know what monsters you're going to experience during the game. You don't necessarily have, what items you're going to, at least then you can just sort through a deck of cards. But digging through this massive pile of monsters to find the right tile, and then stick the right monster figure in the base, and then have it pop out, and whatever is frustrating. It's time consuming, and I wish there's a better way to handle that. That it would have been able to provide that out of the box, like, hey, these are potential monsters you might encounter during this mission as part of the setup, so make sure you have them set up to the side or something when you're setting up the game. Overall, the game is one of the most immersive storytelling narrative games that I own in my collection. I clearly love it enough that I've bought a ton of expansions for it. It's a really solid game, and if you're like me and you enjoy narrative games, this is a game I would recommend. And like I said, I put it at a 7. I've run it at conventions. It's definitely a game that I enjoy, and the app just takes this game from being miserable to play to really quite fun to play. And with that wraps up our episode for today. We covered Gen Con and all of the things that Conzi and Suzanne got up to at Gen Con. We covered our hobby, talked about Extra Life and what Wisco Dice is doing for Extra Life this year. And then we dove into Mansions of Madness and gave you our thoughts and feelings about this great narrative, app-driven game that lets you discover the mythos.
Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you leave a review of this show wherever your favorite place is to find podcasts. Oh, and by the way, give us a like on our Facebook page. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Pinterest while you're at it. If you haven't looked recently, make sure you catch up on the blog at wiscodice.com. Hey, Brian, what's that site?
Oh, darn. I forget. Justin, what's our website again?
Wiscodice.com.
That's right. It's wiscodice.com. And until next time, everyone, peace out.